Communication is a key part of the world we live in today. And for better or for worse, one of the largest and most rapidly changing forms of communication is social media and marketing. We often don't like to think of things like branding or campaigns or marketing strategies when we think about charities and other volunteer services. After all, it's what the fashion labels do. It's what the golden arches do to get you to buy their food. But the reality is that in an overstimulated and oversaturated world of content, of influencers, and of business social media accounts, the online space is constantly vying for your attention. And charities find themselves in a unique position of doing the amazing work they do, but also needing to engage with new and existing supporters. Today, we're going to be talking with members of a team that I'm a part of, the Communications Department in Hope for Justice. We're going to be talking about their significance in the charity sector, and also connect the dots for you as to how communication and marketing is not all bad. In fact, it's helping in the fight to end modern slavery and human trafficking. Hello and welcome to the latest episode of Let's Talk About It. For those of you who are tuning in for the first time, welcome. Let's Talk About It is our educational mini-series where we sit down and talk with professionals about issues surrounding modern-day slavery and human trafficking. My name is Homs. I am a filmmaker, motion graphic designer, and co-host here on Let's Talk About It. And today, we're going to be talking about how charities are evolving with the modern day, utilizing emerging communication technologies in order to further their cause. Today, I'm sat with Antonia. Hi, you're right, Antonia?
I'm great, how are you?
Yeah, I'm pretty good. I'm pretty well, thank you. And Adam, how you doing? All right?
Hi, Homs.
How are you?
I'm doing well, yeah, great.
And Charlotte.
Hello, thank you for having me.
Absolute pleasure. How you doing, Charlotte? You're right.
Very good, thank you.
Great, so let's get into it. Let's start talking about it. So we'll start with you, Adam. Could you just give us a quick rundown of who you are and what you do in Hope for Justice?
Yeah, hi. Well, thanks, Homs. Yeah, my name is Adam Hewitt. I'm the Head of Digital and Communications at Hope for Justice. I've been with the charity just under 7 years at this point. It's been a fantastic experience. For that, I was a journalist for many years, focusing especially on issues to do with human rights and public policy. And I brought some of that experience with me to Hope for Justice, and now just really enjoy working with a fantastic team.
Awesome. And same for you, Antonia. Could you just tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. So my name is Antonia Borman. I am the Marketing and Campaign Specialist at Hope for Justice. My day-to-day kind of consists of planning our campaigns, whether that's campaigns to raise awareness, to change policy and legislation, or to fundraise for some of our fantastic work that's happening with our programs.
My name is Charlotte. So I am the social media strategist here at Hope for Justice. Really doesn't encompass my role. I do pretty much all things social media. So anything from the content strategy and planning to the creation and pulling those ideas together, as well as community management. So connecting with our followers, responding to comments and questions about our charity and the cause, and then working with influencers as well to really amplify our campaigns, our messages, and reach new audiences. So plenty to keep me busy, it's safe to say.
Absolutely. Well, it's really great to have all three of you on today. And I guess I'll just lead with, my first question, which is, how is your role, your individual roles, helping to end modern slavery and to change lives?
Yeah, well, I think very similar to training or to partnerships, a lot of our work is getting the word out and kind of communicating to the audience why this matters, what is happening, and what we can do about it. Some of the main things that we need to focus on is getting people to care. I think in a world where there's so many different issues and so much kind of content and people talking about lots of different things, it can be really difficult to kind of pierce through that traffic and be able to find something that you're not desensitized to. and to really hear the stories of a lot of people and really connect to that and empathize. So I think part of my role and the role of the communications team is to really showcase what's happening and what we can do about it and get people to really care and really connect with these things, because it can be really hard in a world that's so busy as ours to kind of pierce through that. Another thing is to showcase what we're doing, I think Hope for Justice is doing fantastic work in lots of different various ways, like I said, through policy or through our programs, but without being able to communicate that, how are the audience going to know what we're doing on such a global scale as well? So part of our job is to showcase that and to highlight that and to give thanks in a way as well, to say thank you to everyone who's supported us and show them what exactly we're doing about it.
Yeah, well, I'm one of the professionals who kind of sits behind the scenes at Hope for Justice slightly. I'm not out on the front lines every day like our amazing workers all over the world doing that stuff. But equally, I think that myself and the communications team have got a really important role to play in telling those stories and getting those stories of the work that the frontline teams do and the experiences that those victims and survivors have had, and getting that message out there to the wider world so people know what is going on, so we can raise that awareness, so we can turn that awareness into action. And so we can also keep our supporters and the general public updated, and then get these issues into the halls of power as well, the rooms where these decisions are being made. And the communications team here at the charity's got a really important role in doing that, in listening and tracking down these stories, and then getting them out there in a variety of ways through text and video and social and all sorts of other methods. And also just on accountability as well, we need to be open. As a charity, we want to tell people how we're spending money, what we do, how our governance works, the rules that we abide by. And again, as a comms team, we've got an important role in disseminating that information.
And maybe sticking with you, Adam, for just a moment, could you just talk a little bit about what some of the major differences have been between maybe when you first started out in your career to now? Yeah,
well, it's in my title. Really. My title here is Head of Digital Communications, and that's really one of the keys to this. Everything is so digital, so immediate, so smartphone based, and that's been a real change. When I started at Hope for Justice, we used to often communicate with supporters by recording a video, literally sending it to them in the post on a CD or on a DVD, which already today seems really quaint. We would never think to do that anymore. Yeah. And while there are still things we do physically, we do send out letters and reports. Increasingly, when we talk about comms, what we really mean is digital communications. That is just the nature of it. That's obviously with all the changes with social media, the new networks we work with, the new ways that people use video, especially on social media, to kind of platform themselves. We're obviously in that world as Hope for Justice as well, and communicating with those audiences, as well as brand new technologies, things that have just exploded in the last few months, like AI, of course, which people are going to be using to find out information about this issue and our work as a charity.
Maybe we could touch on where the future of communications will be going, but for now, I'd just love to get your thoughts, Charlotte, on that. For you, from a social media perspective, same question. How has it changed?
Social media gives us the opportunity to be that shop window to such a huge amount of people, right? So we can reach people all over the world. Yeah. It's not necessarily in our control because of the algorithms, but it's on a different level compared to what it's ever been before, because traditional awareness building and fundraising and connecting with the public, you'd be limited to, like you said, being at that event, having that stall, or doing the door-to-door fundraising. A lot of that's still super relevant, and I don't think it takes anything away from that. I think it's more than we've had before. It's a fantastic space to connect with a wide variety of people.
So it's really great to get a quick download of your individual roles, how they've changed over the years and how they all contribute to the greater Hope for Justice mission of ending modern slavery and changing lives. I'd like to just quickly delve deeper into what you said at the very start, Antonia. You mentioned that a big part of your role was getting the word out, mobilizing people around a particular issue of human trafficking and modern slavery. In a world where there are so many different causes and topics and conversations about all sorts of things. Like how do we go about choosing, a campaign for Hope for Justice? What are the key factors that go into deciding when and what our campaigns focus on? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it is to do with what's happening in the world and what's happening at the time of the campaign. So, we want to make sure that what we're talking about is relevant and is, based on fact. A lot of the stuff kind of goes into what have our audiences heard before, what have they maybe not heard before, what's a new and kind of creative way to educate someone about the issue or to raise awareness or raise funds as well. So, for example, in our National Human Trafficking and Modern Slavery Prevention Month, we basically looked at peeling it right back to the definitions and really, challenging those misconceptions that I talked about before. Because unfortunately, even though this has been around for decades, it's still something that has a huge amount of misconceptions and taboos surrounding that. So our focus for that was really to make sure that everyone knew exactly what the definitions were, exactly what the symptoms were, and exactly what we could do about that. In contrast, for our International Women's Day campaign, we wanted to kind of show solidarity and support and make a lot more about showcasing the stories of other women that we have either worked with or women that are part of our organisation or who have, benefited or been involved in different programmes that we've done as well. So that was more about using the campaign as a platform to showcase and celebrate and empower women across the industry as well. So basically, when I'm looking at a campaign, I will sit down and I'll look at the context of both the organisation, the world, what people are paying attention to, and then I'll look at the kind of content of what do people need to know about, what is something that needs to be talked about right now, and how do we basically package that in a way that is engaging and interesting and makes people want to really talk about it. So yeah, if I had to narrow it down to two words, I would say context and content.
Yeah. So just pivoting over to you two, Adam and Charlotte, we have the content, we have the context. What's the value in like communicating that through, online, through an online platform, through having an online presence? Like, why not just continue doing the door-to-door thing or the sending of discs to our supporters or via email now? Like what's the significance of and the value to having an online presence in the modern day?
Well, it's the first place almost everybody goes to look these days. Obviously, it's going to be Google or it's going to be searching on socials. And what we want them to find the truth about this issue. We want them to find accurate information about it, real stories. And obviously, as Hope for Justice, we want them to find our work and our model, and for them to get interested and engaged with that. It's absolutely vital, and we have to think, not just about people kind of researching on desktop computers, but of course, we need to think about people using their phones. We need to think about how older people are going to engage with us, how teenagers are going to engage with us, and how we communicate with different audiences between businesses and governments and community groups and schools. There's loads of different people to think about when we're kind of getting the message out about this issue, and it affects people in different ways.
That's the thing. Like, I mean, I definitely would say that there's more value in the social workers in the lighthouses, but then at the same time, for that work to be done, we need to generate money to actually enable that work. So I think everybody holds value, and there's not this kind of sense of one person's work being any more valuable or one charity being any better than, or at least there isn't, face to face. It generally is like this quite supportive area of causes, and I think that's because everybody understands it's bigger than one person and it's bigger than one organisation.
Yeah, and I think what you're saying there is touched on a really important aspect of communications, which is to get rid of any miscommunication that's out there and misconceptions, because especially with a subject such as modern slavery and human trafficking, there's so much misconceptions out there that people just take as fact, you know, some of them being that sex trafficking is the only form of human trafficking, which it isn't. There's many other forms, unfortunately, but also thinking that, you know, you have to be kidnapped in order, or like held with bondage in order to be really kept and you know, trapped in something. But a lot of it is, you know, psychological or societal. There's also a lot of like legislation that can actually really, really harm victims and stop victims from speaking up. It's not that they are physically held, you know, captive, though that does happen as well. But most commonly, it's usually, you know, to do with some sort of fear or coercion that's happening as well. So I think one of the really important jobs with communication is dispelling those misconceptions and really educating people on what exactly it is, because once we dispel those, we can then learn how to stop it properly, rather than just tackling, you know, the surface level problem. We can teach people what the root of the problem is and then actually, you know, conquer it.
Exactly, yeah. So from Charlotte, I'll kind of turn to you for this, because obviously, you know, social media, you kind of are managing a community of people who have loads of different opinions and want to engage. Can you talk a little bit about some of the positives and negatives of when people actually engage with the campaigns that we run, or the communication sort of strategies that we go with?
Yeah, so I mean, there's a lot of misconceptions around human trafficking and modern slavery. Let's start with that. And because of that lack of general understanding, we do get negative comments. And just to be clear on Hope for Justice, any kind of discriminative, racist, just inappropriate comments, there's no space for that on the page, and that's the sort of reactions that we would just take down immediately. But then you do get comments that there's room for conversation, and as an organisation, it is our responsibility to educate, and we as individuals within this organisation, we're surrounded by a wealth of expertise. There's a network of people which are so involved and educated and have that experience within this field that we feed off, that we get this knowledge of, and you know, that's what we want to pass on to these audiences. So we definitely look at the negative comments where there's space for meaningful conversation and there's space to actually educate someone there, or at least help pivot their opinion, but then we are just aware of where there might be a bit of a dead end there, and we don't want to antagonize potentially, you know, comments that somebody could see that could be triggering, or that could be that could just get into an argument. So we try be quite informative, quite direct, and we still stand our ground with, no, this is the facts, and you know, this. So for example, a very common misconception is that it's another country's problem. It's, you know, happening in the global south. It doesn't happen in the UK, it doesn't happen in the USA. And those sorts of comments, which can sometimes be really negative, that's the sort of comment where we do want to engage in that conversation, because we've got that responsibility to actually change that perception, and we need to change that perception, because otherwise how are we actually going to eradicate modern slavery if people don't even recognise it's happening on their doorstep? So yeah, I think managing it is definitely the key term there.
Yeah, it's really important, I think, and again, as a former journalist, this does matter to me. I think getting the facts right and making sure that what we say is based on evidence. And so as a comms team here, we spend a lot of time talking again with our frontline program staff and our policy people, and making sure that if we're putting a statistic out there into the world and onto the internet, that it's backed up by the truth. unfortunately, the internet being what it is, there is a lot of facts and things out there that maybe aren't. They're either exaggerated or they've been misunderstood or kind of warped out of their original context. And we don't think that's right. We want to make sure that people are basing their decisions on the truth, both in terms of where things like human trafficking happen and who is affected and how often, and also our own kind of stats and impact as Hope for Justice. We want to make sure that's all based completely on the truth. There have been things over the years going on connected to this issue. It's a very emotive issue and can be a political issue, and people do have really strong opinions. And so, over the years there have been, people saying things online about, for example, child trafficking, and unfortunately some of the statistics they've been putting out around that have not been true. Honestly, it's a devastating issue, but some people have felt the need to kind of push their own agenda on this with facts and stats and methods of trafficking that honestly don't have much basis in reality.
So what do you actually do with that? So I get, when people are misinformed or aren't aware of all the facts, and so there is a responsibility there to educate and to resource people with the facts. But then what do we do with people who are actively trying to misinform, are trying to bend the truth in order to fit a particular political ideology or agenda or what do you do as an organization with bad faith actors, people who are trying to misinterpret on purpose?
If it's somebody who is clearly out there with an agenda based in hate or in prejudice, we're not necessarily going to engage with that. And unfortunately, like any organisation with internet presence, sometimes you do get that kind of thing coming, and in that case, we'll ignore it or delete it. And then occasionally, people will have just strong political opinions. And again, we're not a political charity at Hope for Justice. We obviously have to engage with those who make our laws. But our agenda is always just to push the rights and interests of victims and survivors of this crime, and that is not going to be to do with a political party's view. That's going to be to do with what the overall law and how it affects those individuals.
And what do you think, Charlotte? How does it work on your end from social media perspective?
Yeah, I mean, we definitely take the approach of staying in our lane. So we're an anti-slavery charity. We have got these core pillars of work of where we kind of address our attention and make the most impact. So we stick to what we know and what we do, and we always try to bring the conversation back round to that in terms of people having that political agenda or even wanting to navigate down that political route. If we're working on, we don't shy away from government and policy. That's a core area of our work. So if we can speak into it, then we will 100%, and we will provide the facts, like what we're actually dealing with, what we're actually seeing, and what we're actually advising, which in these situations, we have got people in government influencing policy. Like, it's really important and critical work. So we will openly speak about that. And if anybody has any questions, we will speak about that. But if the conversation is leading, like you said, down towards someone's personal agenda, and if there's not going to be something meaningful out of that conversation, if everyone's entitled to their opinion and we're not, we wouldn't take that away from the space. But in terms of the community space that we've created and the conversations we're having on our channels, that is what we control and what we can navigate. And we just want to make sure that it's navigating in a healthy direction. The issue can cause a lot of, heightened feelings and emotions around it, which is totally fair. But we just want to make sure that anybody from all walks of life that comes to the page, can engage in a meaningful conversation and not something that is, harmful or that is just insulting or upsetting.
Staying in your lane, Charlotte, you mentioned that just a few moments ago, but as an anti-trafficking charity, Hope for Justice, we are always, celebrating different events that might not on the surface feel like it's directly correlated to human trafficking. Like we had, International Women's Day, we had a campaign for Earth Day, we do talk about other things as well. So Antonia, just from your perspective, like where do we toe that line between only talking about the direct issues that relate to human trafficking and modern day slavery, but then also other humanitarian issues that are really important, but there might be, like human trafficking adjacent. Can you just talk a little bit about that and like how, intersectionality kind of plays a part there?
Definitely. You use that word intersectionality, and it's one of my absolute favorite words. And if you haven't heard of this word before, I highly recommend Googling it, first of all, because the research out there is just absolutely brilliant. Yeah. Kimberly Crenshaw is one of the best activists out there, and she came up with this word and talked about how a lot of our humanitarian and social justice issues are interconnected. And if you really want to solve one and be able to help an issue, you really have to look at the whole problem, and it's very, very complex. It's very entangled. So you need to be able to look at that and not just focus on one thing, but really try and talk about other things as well. So I think it's so important to have this intersectional lens when you look at any type of social justice or humanitarian issue, because it all impacts the other, whether that's, gender or race or sexuality or environmental issues or any kind of humanitarian issue. You need to look at it, looking at it from a modern slavery and human trafficking perspective, which is obviously where we're coming from and what we're trying to focus on. The way that you kind of pierce through those issues, because unfortunately, as much as I'd love to, we can't fix all of the issues in the world, and we can't use all our resources to try and solve everything, because if we do that, then the issue of modern slavery, which is what we're focused on, kind of gets lost in the mix of everything, So it's important, I think, to have our key kind of guiding light, which is the mission of ending modern slavery, and having that and talking about how all these other intersectional issues relate to that. So, whether that is through talking about how women are impacted for International Women's Day in modern slavery and human trafficking, or for Earth Day, we talked about how climate change can cause climate refugees who are then usually targeted for human trafficking, or, how different industries such as fast fashion or, mining or fisheries, which cause environmental issues, also are the places where human trafficking is rife. So again, when we're looking at all these issues, we can take it from that lens of human trafficking and modern slavery, but then also still really highlighting the overall social justice issue and giving light to that. So we're able to kind of talk about both things at once and help the audience, relate to that and be empowered by that, and maybe learn something new. If you're really empowered by environmental issues, for example, you might not have known about the, modern slavery that happens in a lot of these industries as well. So, even just educating someone who's already empowered in maybe one social justice issue and trying to teach them about another and get them empowered for that as well.
Yeah, of course. I think it's rare for there to be an actual line. I think it almost is it's almost always a kind of spectrum where issues do cross over and overlap, and our absolute focus is on the interests and rights of victims and survivors of modern slavery. That is inevitably sometimes going to cross over with other charitable causes and other issues in our world, social issues and things to do with poverty in places, things to do with work and people, moving countries for work and all kinds of issues like this. It's going to be linked with social issues around things like prostitution and pornography sometimes. So there's lots of issues where our work will overlap with the work of other charities, other social causes. Ultimately, all we say, I think, as a comms team is that as long as our focus is on those victims and survivors, and we can honestly say that what we are putting out into the world and what we are commenting on is to advance those interests, I think that's kind of where we draw the line. It's we don't want to be pushing the kind of beliefs or political positions of individual people at this charity, unless it's only when it's in alignment with the interests of victims and survivors.
Yeah. So Adam, I think I brought it up at the very beginning of this, but what is some of the stuff that you're really looking forward to and excited within an online space with online communication and how it's going to help bring about the end of modern day slavery and human trafficking?
Yeah, it's often still in that area of interactivity. I think we're really interested in people being able to more easily engage and understand the kind of stories of survivors, for example, and how digital technologies can be used for that, how people might be able to experience something in, say, a VR space that otherwise they'd never be able to understand. We obviously, as Hope for Justice, we work all around the world. We're in not just the UK and USA and Norway, but other countries too, Ethiopia, Uganda, other places that most people listening to this might not have experiences of, especially dealing with kind of street children and kids who've been exploited and vulnerable to trafficking and now safe in our lighthouses. How could we tell their stories in a way that people can be empathetic with and kind of engage with? Using our kind of website in new ways, for example, and how people can access information, how people can get resources that they can then share out and put on their own social media, their own new networks and everything else. With things like AI, that's still obviously such a brand new area. You know, we're only beginning now to explore what that could look like. But yeah, there's all kinds of new ways with data and kind of things like blockchain, things like cloud computing even, beyond our role here just as a comms team. But there's some really interesting things going on with technologies like that and how we can kind of collaborate with other agencies to make sure that we're kind of spotting trends, spotting patterns. You know, if an address of a victim turns up on two different databases, right now that would require somebody picking up the phone and spotting something manually and crossing fingers that somebody spots that pattern. With some of the tech we're potentially investing in now, that wouldn't rely on that anymore. It would be an automatic flag on a system. Data would be kept private and safe and encrypted, but we would know that another organisation is potentially also looking at the same address, and that could, you know, suggest a pattern to do with human trafficking.
Guys, thank you so much for jumping onto the podcast today. It's been really great to hear all of your different perspectives. And just before we sign off, I'd just love, Charlotte, if you could just give us some quick tips on how to engage and what people at home can do to help in the fight against modern day slavery.
Yeah, sure. Well, I mean, for starters, I would advise everybody to look at empowering their own feed. And by that, I mean following anti-slavery charities. Feel free to go Hope for Justice. But also just other anti-slavery charities that, that you're interested in their work and you want to support their work. Human rights activists, ethical businesses, just that following and being a part of that community is not only showing your support and helping with their presence in those digital spaces, but you're also ultimately going to learn something. And I think there's always space for us all to learn something. And the content that we're all putting out there, it is to inform, it is to educate, and if more and more people can share that content, save that content, comment on it, it like we said, it's gonna increase that risk significantly, and then ultimately, you'll get to know the organisations. These channels are spaces for us to really kind of showcase what we're doing, and educate, help spread awareness. So hopefully from that will gain people's trust, and then you will feel more confident or willing and wanting to invest further and empower some of the incredible initiatives that are happening offline, which is really what comes down to the crux of it, needing those donations and needing that financial support. But if don't feel like you need to do that straight away, if you want to learn more about the organisation, start with social media, and get behind us and engage.